Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fearlessly Authentic. I'm your host, Jody Harrison Bauer, and thank you so much for joining me today. This is the show where we educate you, empower you, entertain you a little bit, and inspire you to live your most fearlessly authentic life. Because, in my humble opinion, what the heck are we doing here if we are not trying to live our most fearlessly authentic life? And today's guest is one of the most fearlessly authentic people that you are going to hear from. And it's a different subject today also, but it's about helping people every single week to become the most fearlessly authentic person that they can be, to step into their power, to live in their truth, and to not be somebody else for somebody else. So we all need to promise ourselves that we do not do that. I also wanted to thank you all very much for making this podcast a top 5% globally ranked podcast. Because of you, we are a top ranked podcast. Thank you for subscribing, for rating, reviewing, for sharing. We really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you and thank you for listening. Today's guest is somebody who I came across on Instagram, and I was just so inspired by the information that she was sharing for women going through divorce, because you've heard me talk about it on the show before about my divorce. I've been divorced for 22 years. It was a long time ago, but I use it as a reference because it was such a turning point in my life. It was the time where I went from not living fearlessly authentic to taking that big leap into becoming the most fearlessly authentic person. And as I said at the beginning of the show, it's not easy to do every day. It's a struggle to sometimes do it. But if we know what our truth is and we understand what it is, then we can always try to become that person that we know we want to be, and not the people pleaser person, not the person who is trying to be something for somebody else. And when I came across Michelle's Instagram, I loved the message that she was sharing with other women. So today's guest is Michelle Dempsey-Multack. She is the best-selling author of Simon & Schuster's Moms Moving On: Real Life Advice on Conquering Divorce, Co-Parenting Through Conflict, and Becoming Your Best Self, and founder of the Moms Moving On community. Her notoriety on Instagram, coupled with her extensive expertise in divorce and co-parenting, have made her a sought-after coach. Michelle also hosts the popular weekly divorce podcast, Moms Moving On. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Oh, yay. Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be here too. I came across your Instagram and I just loved how open you were. And I had wished that somebody like you was around when I was getting divorced 22 years ago.
Well,
And
if I had a dollar for every time I heard that, I wouldn't have to be doing this. No, I'm just kidding.
I know it's crazy, and so much has changed in the 22 years that I've been divorced. Um, so much has changed, and I think it is because of social media, because we do have all of this information right there for us versus opening up a phone book and looking for a lawyer and knowing that there are all these other people that could help us get through a divorce easier, even though there isn't anything easy about going through a divorce, especially if you
Right.
have children.
Right.
So I was hoping that you could share your own personal journey with the ladies listening, because I'm sure many of them can relate to your story.
Yeah, for sure. So, I feel bad for anybody listening to this who already knows me because you guys know my story, but it's really simple. I was a child of divorce who didn't get the support and help that I needed through a very litigious, contentious 10-year divorce battle. My entire existence, as I remember it. My parents' divorce started when I was 8. And I remember the day I was graduating my high school, my mom telling me, like, I think we're finalizing this week, finally. So, like, my entire existence. And within that became estranged from my father and never, I guess our parents didn't know what we know now. And my mom thought I was seemingly okay, and I was definitely not. But none of that bubbled up to the surface in its entirety until I married my ex-husband, my now ex-husband. And everything in that marriage was wrong. And he was not bad, and I was not bad. We were just bad together. And I didn't see, like, I did not have the self-awareness at the time to know what parts of me needed healing or how unready I was for a marriage. But within that very short time that we were married, I became a mom to my only biological child. And I knew from the minute that I held her in my arms that, like, A, the marriage was not going to last if it didn't change. And B, I knew the only way it could change, I could change, is if I were no longer in that union.
Mm.
So we separated when she was 2. She's now going to be 10 soon. It's crazy.
Wow.
And I knew from the jump, and my ex-husband at the time did not see things the way I did. He did not think we needed a divorce. I know inherently he wasn't happy either. We were like a miserable couple, but at the time, like, I came from divorce. He didn't want it. So co-parenting in the beginning was very difficult because he was upset with me, and rightfully so. Um, and I never betrayed my belief that she needed a strong relationship to him and with him. And I always knew he was going to be an amazing dad, and was an amazing dad. And in fact, like, us not being together gave him more freedom to be the dad that he is, because it wasn't like me and his hair all the time and like stepping on their toes. But it was that part was easy, like accepting that this was how it had to be. The hard part was, oh my God, I'm 33. I'm divorced. I'm the only one of my friends in my community. Everyone's still like having babies and pregnant, and I am like all alone, like nowhere to go on a Saturday night when all the couples are getting together. And I started writing about it. I was already blogging for a number of like mommy outlets, and I started talking about like the perils of young single motherhood and
Mm.
co-parenting, and how much this sucked and how heavy it was. Even if I chose this, it was, wow, I didn't realize life on the other side could feel this tough. And with
Mm.
that came a big Instagram following, and people would send me their questions, and I didn't know how to answer them. So I started my podcast, Mom's Moving On. And then a couple months later, um, decided I was going to write a book, and got my book deal with Simon and Schuster. And so it's been like an evolving process ever since. I was already an educator. I have 2 masters in education, and I'm a specialist in early childhood. But then I got certified as a co-parenting specialist and a divorce specialist, and all of that together has helped me build, what I think has been as rewarding of a career as it's been therapeutic. And I love the work that I do.
Well, you're helping so many women feel powerful at a time in their life where they feel so alone. And so much of what you just shared, I can relate to. I was 42. I was married for 17 years. I had an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old. And there's no good time to get divorced.
No,
He
but
didn't, he
that's an especially tough time.
tell me about it. And my daughter, bat mitzvah was in 6 months. And I decided to file in January of 2002, and her bat mitzvah was June of 2002.
Oh my God.
So we put the divorce on hold. He didn't want it. I had asked him to go to therapy. He didn't go. He lied to me about going. And, I had same thing with you. All of my friends were married. I was a little older than you were when you got divorced. But all of my friends were married. They all told me, what are you, crazy?
Hmm.
Like, look at the life you have. You've got the fancy
Hmm.
cars, the fancy house, the fancy vacations, the private schools, everything that everybody. So if I was on Instagram now, like at 42 or in my 30s, everybody, it's like what all those kids show now. And I'm like, but I didn't want it because I wasn't happy. And just like you, I didn't really have a lot of self-awareness because I was his wife, I was their mommy, and that's all I was. I stopped working in 1989. And that was something we agreed on. So I understand the loneliness you felt. I understand, like, none of my friends continue to be friends with me except for maybe 1 or 2 couples.
Oh my God.
They,
Because God forbid they catch your divorce disease,
God forbid, it was so frowned upon. And then if you send your kids to private school, the private mommies do not ever get divorced. They are against divorce. So I had like a scarlet A on me, D on me. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. And I did my best, I my goal was to show them what a strong woman is, but also to have it was very important to me for them to have a very good relationship with their dad. He got engaged 6 months after we got divorced, typical blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
So, but he's a great father. And, 22 years later, we can actually get on the phone and talk. But it was a long time. So when I hear you talk about um, the animosity, the fighting, all of these
Mhm.
things going on for the children, you've really become an advocate to help women get through that very hard time because it's not easy for everybody listening who's thinking about getting divorced. We're not saying you should, we're saying to work through it. But if you need to, because it's all you can do at this point, it is hard. Divorce is hard. I don't know anybody who says it's easy. What has
Right.
been
But
your experience?
in my experience, and I've worked with hundreds of women and men at this point, it all really, it doesn't matter the circumstance you're in, whether you're coming out of something incredibly high conflict and toxic, or like you and I decided this is not the life for me. I'm going to just move on peacefully. It doesn't matter if you've come from a lot of money, no money. It all boils down to a choice. Like, am I going to let this divorce define me, break me, you know, burn the scarlet letter D into my chest, or am I going to use this as an opportunity for better? And the people who choose to use divorce as their opportunity to evolve personally, to set better examples for their
Rise
kids,
above.
these are the people who have a much easier time separating their emotions from parenting. And that is the difficulty and the simplicity, really, of co-parenting. The only way to make co-parenting work in a way that doesn't affect your kids, problem is everyone makes it about themselves, the adults. Oh, how could I co-parent with him? He did this. Well, you have to because your kids are expecting you to. So the person who can say, you know what, they're my ex and they live in that category as an adult, but they're also my child's parent. And I'm going to separate all of my divorce emotions from that so that I can give my kid what they're entitled to, which is a life that is as close to what it would have been had we stayed married.
And that's not easy. I remember by the way, you are the first woman on my show in 4.5 years that I've ever had talking on this subject. And I do talk about my divorce as the biggest turning point in my life on this show a lot, even though it was 22 years ago. But that was the turning point for me to live the life to be fearlessly authentic,
Hmm.
because I wasn't not that I was being something else. So I'm just so excited that we're talking about this because you are helping so many women. And I think, separating yourself from the person you were married to how you're parenting that child, that's really hard when, let's just say, disciplining the
Hmm.
children is not on the same level. Can you give some advice around
Yeah,
that subject?
absolutely. What I like to do is first ask people to be realistic, right? Like, let's pretend everything was fine and we stayed together in the same home and there was never a divorce. Were you guys really going to discipline the same? And think about your own childhood. Your
Mm,
mom disciplined in one way, your dad disciplined in the other. And the culmination of that was you and all your beliefs and how you behave as a human today. So, is it we need them to discipline just like us for our kid to be okay? Or is it we need them to discipline just like me so I can feel okay, so I don't have
mm.
any unanswered questions, so I don't have to worry about the unknown? And really, there is no one way, right? So the discipline, the bedtime, the routines, our children, we don't give them enough credit. My therapist always says this to me, actually. I was like a pittance of a child compared to what my daughter is. She's strong. She's fearlessly authentic. She's all these things I wasn't. And my therapist always says to me, you don't give enough credit to the fact that children are incredibly resilient. They can go to one home and fall in line, just like they go to school and fall in line. They go to their team sport and they fall in line with whatever that
Mm.
routine is. Nothing has to be the same across the board except for one thing. But in terms of discipline and lifestyle, it doesn't have to be the same across the board in order to raise a healthy, resilient child who can do amazing things. What has to be consistent across the board is that the child feels a healthy attachment, a sense of
Mm.
security, and whatever that looks like, however that's given and however that's built individually between the child and each parent doesn't matter so long as it's there, because that sets the foundation for a child to thrive, not everything across the board the same because you've decided in your head that the way you do it is better than anybody else. There has to be
Yes.
a level of acceptance. Like if you
That's
can't
hard. That's
accept,
hard. That's hard when you see things differently.
right,
It's
you
for me,
see
it
things
was
differently
right.
and you got
But
divorced
that's a
because
great point.
you got divorced because you are in fact different. And so the
Right.
expectations are what need to be aligned and changed right off the bat. The expectation that they're going to listen to you when you tell them how to parent or what time to put the kids to bed, or they're going to do things the same way you did magically just because you're divorced and not in the same house anymore. It doesn't work like that. So you have to look at yourself and say, okay, am I freaking out about this one parenting issue because it really will mean so much in the long term, or is it a control thing? Is it a
Mm,
fear thing? Is it I do things one way because I am this way and anything else is scary to me? So it's worth exploring yourself in therapy.
absolutely. And my daughters did go to therapy while we were going through our divorce, but it was 22, like I said, 22 years later, I still remember a lot of things that we could have done differently. And let's talk about the guilt
Mhm.
that many women suffer from and thinking, well, oh, if I didn't get divorced, maybe this would have been better for her or for him. How do you help women overcome that feeling of guilt?
This has been a really big theme lately amongst my clients because the women who come to work with me, I think because I was the initiator in my divorce, the women who come to work with me are usually like 9 times out of 10 initiators. And there is this overwhelming sense of guilt. Like
And they do say women file for divorce more than men, right? I think that's a
they
larger
do.
percentage.
What I find is that men are more willing to live in a codependent mindset because it's safer, it's easier, it's more predictable,
Mhm.
versus a woman who is fulfilled in different ways and doesn't want to just settle and deal with things as they are. So, anyway, that's a whole separate conversation. But
Right.
I think the guilt is really, we're raised as little girls to be respectful and polite and kind. And there's a different mentality and how a little girl is taught to behave versus how, oh, boys will be boys, but like, so as women, we are also biologically nurturers. And the idea of hurting somebody we love is just so out of body and out of character, even if you are a vicious hatred human being, like it's just not a natural thing to do. And so I always ask people to look at the intention behind this choice that they made that they feel so guilty for. Did they make the choice solely and explicitly to hurt somebody else? Did they make the choice to better themselves and as a byproduct feelings were hurt? Okay, that's something totally different. So that we're not going to go to court and be sentenced to 25 to life because we committed the crime of choosing divorce. That's our shame that's carrying
Mm, mm.
staying with us. And so if you look at that shame and kind of like flip the perspective, like, okay, so what if I left this marriage and I pissed off my ex and things could have been better at home? Well, you wouldn't have left if they were better at home. You likely spent 4 or 5 years agonizing because that's the average time a woman spends.
So
And
true.
and in that time, were you giving your children the best version of you, the healthiest, most secure version of love that they could see? So there's so many unknowns, but what's known is that guilt is a feeling like anything else. You're hungry, you eat, the feeling goes away. You're tired, you sleep, the feeling goes away. You're guilty, you feel guilty, you remind yourself that a feeling isn't a fact. And you caring about someone else's feelings is what makes you a great empathetic human being. But you cannot live your very short life sacrificing your own needs to avoid that guilty feeling.
What would you say to the women listening now that are thinking about getting divorced? What types of steps would you suggest for them to take before they finally make that decision? That's their final decision.
That's a good question. And I always give the advice that my mom gave to me when I was very unhappy towards the end of my marriage. My mom said, I don't care how long it takes, but you don't want to lay your head down on your pillow at night without knowing that you've tried everything and anything to make it work. So I have turned away so many clients and I've said, do me a favor. Even if you know in your heart of hearts you want totally out of this marriage, go to therapy. just humor me, drag that person to the couch of that therapist and go through the motions, because at least you can say you tried, and let the
Mhm.
counselor point out who's at fault for what and who could get better at what. Because even if you do end it, you're going to know moving forward what
Mhm.
responsibility was yours to carry and what wasn't. Because if you just like leave up and leave out of
Right.
nowhere, it's a mess.
Right.
So first and foremost, make sure you've worked this through with a professional, then do your research. You don't want to be the person who just throws someone else out and you don't know what's coming down the pipeline financially, if you even have access to your bank accounts, how much money is in them. Money in marriages is a very funny thing. I always refer women before they even file to speak to, there are some amazing female financial professionals that whose work is dedicated to helping women prepare to leave,
Mhm.
to get a secure financial picture. Know what your financial picture is. Know how much you need to survive on your own at a base level, like not
Right.
including Botox and
Right.
bottles of Sancerre.
Food, shelter.
Right,
Yes, the
right.
necessities.
And understand the laws around divorce in the state that you live in. Is
Mhm.
if you have a newborn and your state traditionally is a 50-50 co-parenting state, and that's not something you think you could handle with a newborn, think about that. You know, it's not you don't go to it's not like the movies where you show up in court and you're like, I only want him to see the kids on the weekend, and they're like, okay, like it doesn't work like that. So really do your research. But I know that 99% I mean, everyone's researching and Googling and going around in circles in their head for years before they come to this decision. The one thing I will say across the board that is the worst thing that you can do is physically leave the home and leave your children behind with the other parent, because that will be seen as abandonment. And that's not something you want to have to work out in court.
Right. Never leave the home. And never, I can't imagine a
And if you
mom.
have to leave for safety reasons, have your
Right. That's a
kids with
different
you.
story.
You
Right.
don't you don't want to be painted in court because your ex's attorney will say she abandoned the children. Why should she have any time
Mhm.
with the children?
Mhm.
Don't do that.
You hear so many stories of the woman filing, the man leaving the house, finding an apartment or living elsewhere.
Well, it doesn't really work like that anymore.
Oh, okay. So, well, going back to 2002, um, so my ex-husband is an attorney who does expert witness testimony in divorce cases. So, he never left. So that was I'll never forget. That was very interesting getting ready for court the day we went to court. And yeah, he never left. I hear all these stories about women where their husbands leave and they get divorced and the husband's just left. But
hmm
so that doesn't happen anymore?
Not
Oh,
that easily. No, I think,
oh,
well, my career in all of this started right before COVID. And in COVID in 2020, there was a 60% uptick in divorces. However, everyone was trapped in the same house together. One, because of sheltering in place. Two, because now all of a sudden the majority of people aren't working, or they're working from home, and people are taking out PPP loans. Like nobody knew what to do with themselves. So I have had, I think, more clients who are divorcing
mhm.
while in the same home than I've had, this like picturesque movie scene of like, and get out and stay out. And then he like goes and gets an apartment somewhere, you know? But
Only in the movies.
right. But, anytime there's an issue of like finances, right? Like if finances aren't overflowing and just going out and getting an apartment isn't like going out and picking up a stick of gum, your lawyer's going to say like, stay put, let's figure out the
Right.
finances first, right? Like we don't want to give the picture that there's all this extra money to throw away. So it's very hard to become
Mhm.
physically separated even though you feel so emotionally separated already.
When you help women, when you coach them, are you coaching them from before their divorce or post-divorce?
I work with clients at all stages.
Okay.
My primary focus is, it depends on if the client is pre-filing. I do a lot of the coaching to help them find the right attorney. I'll find them a few
Wow.
different attorneys they can interview, what questions they need to ask, things they need to know, things they need to consider. And from there, we go into how we're helping our kids through this. And so in the work that I do individually with the adults, that's the insurance policy for like making sure our children have a co-parenting experience they won't need to heal from. So a lot of what we do is really just centered around, all right, give me your feelings, let's take them, let's put them here, let's shift the perspective on all of this so that we can show up healthy for our kids and support their relationship with their other parent.
And what if there is, I'm sure you've had all different situations coming to you. Again, going back to parenting and trying to not have anything traumatic happen. How do you have those conversations while you're going through the divorce with the children to make sure, is it important for you to communicate with the children at different ages to
Yes.
tell them what's going on? How
Yeah.
can a woman effectively sit down with her children? Because I remember sitting down with my daughters because he said he would not tell our daughters that we're getting divorced. He said, "You filed, you tell them."
Ugh,
It
I hear
was
this all the time.
one of the hardest, my
Yeah,
12, yeah, it was heartbreaking.
of course. So there are ages and stages, right? So children at different ages process divorce differently, and the effects of divorce on them will be different. So taking that into account, what I do with my clients, and what's been great is even in the most contentious of situations, when it comes time to talk about the conversation with the kids, usually my client's ex will agree to join the Zoom and we'll all craft the conversation together, because at that point it's not about you versus me, it's about like us delivering the biggest
Right.
news ever to our children. And based on their ages and stages developmentally, if there are special needs, if there are issues in the relationship with one parent versus another, that's how we'll craft the conversation. But the underlying point of any conversation, whether one parent is delivering it by themselves or both are delivering it together, is that you did nothing to cause this and nothing you can do will change this. And it is my job as a parent to take care of your feelings, not your job to take care of mine. So
I
that
think that's
means
huge.
if you hear the other parent say something bad about me, don't people say things, let it roll off. It's not your job to defend me. It's not your job to decide that person is bad or good. What we want to do in this conversation is eliminate the idea that like one person caused this,
Mm,
because children always need a villain in their stories. And
mhm.
so we don't want that to be their other parent or you, because that causes a lot of anxiety for them.
I've heard you talk about being a people pleaser yourself,
Hmm.
and when
Former.
you, your former life, you were a people pleaser, myself as well. And I actually refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser,
Hmm.
um, because it is something I had to work very hard at. And in having children, I feel like there's always one child that is trying to be the people pleaser to the parents.
Hmm.
What kind of conversations can you have? Is there anything that you can change to talk to that child about because they want to be good for mommy and for daddy?
Hmm. So it's important, to recognize you can only have an effect on your child, or you can only control what goes on in your own home, right? So like
Right.
you can't control how the other parent makes your child feel, no matter what you teach them, no matter what tools you give them. But something that's a big theme in my house with my daughter, and I think it's really because I was so parentified as a child. I felt so responsible for my parents' emotions, even if it's something as silly as, Belle, should we go to Starbucks or do you want to go to Dunkin' Donuts? I
Hmm.
don't know, mom, whatever you want. No, it's not about me. You're the one who asked for it. Like it's letting my child have this sense of independence from my feelings. And this
Mm.
is where we teach children skills for critical thinking. Bill Eddy, who is the founder of the High Conflict Institute, coined this thing called the four big skills. So it's teaching our kids to have their own independent line of thought, different from a parent's or a grandparent's or a friend at school, and like learn to live okay with duality. Like nothing
Mm.
has to be one way or the other. So a big thing for my daughter is always, you don't have to worry about my feelings. I'm here to worry about yours. If you're being respectful and kind as a child, you're doing your job. But
Mm.
we can disagree and I can still love you. And that's something that I really want her to learn, because I think having been a people pleaser, it's the most stifling,
It is.
inauthentic version of yourself. And
Mhm.
I don't want that for her, because it was too late for me to enjoy my childhood, once I realized,
Right.
like, holy shit, I'm living for the happiness of everyone else.
Right, for validation, for that
Yeah.
permission to say, "Oh, you're doing such a great job, Michelle. Your grades are great. You're the star athlete. You're going to a great college." Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, I
Mhm.
totally understand that. And when is it important to talk to the other parent about when, let's call it a punishment, a consequence to an action? Do both parents have to be on the same page with that?
I think it depends on the action. Like, if it's let's say something that happened at school, right? Like,
Mhm.
your child is suspended because they pushed another kid, and chaos ensued.
Right.
That's a conversation. Like, I know if that were to happen, God forbid, with my child, like, the first person I'd be on the phone with is her dad, right? And then together, we're going to figure out, okay, how do we want to handle this? Like, I'm taking away the iPad in my house,
Right.
but if it's something like, in my house, I told her not to play with slime on the couch, and she did it again, and now it's all over the couch. Like, I'm not going to call him and be like, how should I handle this?
Right.
If it's big stuff, like, you'll know. And
Mhm.
and generally, no matter how contentious, parents when it's a really big issue with their child, most times they'll be able to, like, communicate and at least come to a solution together, if you both have to go meet the principal, or,
Mhm.
so I think it really depends on the severity of the issue, is the answer there.
I was just curious about that. And behavior, when you were talking about the behavior and giving your daughter, it's like, hey, listen, where do you want to go? Starbucks or Dunkin'? Like, where do you want to go? Um, I remember learning way back when is that it's about their behavior. So
Mhm,
if they do something like play with slime on the sofa, they get their iPad taken away. It doesn't mean that we don't love them. It just means that this was the behavior that I asked you not to do. I think it's
mhm,
really important to point out, and I don't know how parents are parenting their kids anymore, but back then I focused personally on the behavior was bad, quote unquote bad,
mhm.
not the child. That
Yeah,
seemed to
that
work.
yeah, and I think also, like, for me, discipline, it's such a harsh word, right? Like,
It is.
children don't know why they do things sometimes, and
Mhm.
most often, the behaviors they have that, one would label bad, is coming from something else. So for me, like, I got a text one day that from my daughter's teacher, like, she's really out of character today. She's been talking all day. Da da da. Da. When she came home, some parents would say, "That's it. Go to your room. You're not going to dance. You're not seeing your friends." For me, it's like, no. What we need here is a connection, and we need to figure out, and she's so cute. Like, I'll sit her down, and I said to her, I'm like, "Babe, do you know why Miss Rodriguez texted me today?" And she right away, I was talking, and I'm like, what happened? You're usually such a good listener. Tell me about that." And, like, just letting your child explain why they feel they did something, or what
Right.
was behind that action, gives them the sense of, like, I'm here for you even if you do something wrong, and I want to help you do better.
Mhm.
So that's my version of discipline. I mean,
Mhm.
my mom used to send me to my room and, like, ground me for a B, and I wasn't allowed to, like, listen to my stereo. It was so
Right,
stupid. What
right,
did that teach
right,
me? Nothing. It made me feel more alone in my feelings.
right. I know. I know. There was always a lot of shaming when it came to divorce. We were talking about that sort of at the beginning. And is that is there still that shaming going on with the women that are coming to you? Do they feel that shame because they need to move on from that relationship? Or are they trying to make it work? What's going on right now in the world with marriages and divorce?
I think it's really specific to the family. I know
Okay.
culturally, certain populations have a much more difficult time with divorce than others. Some of the more, I don't know if the word radical, or, like, observant cultures, like, um, for example, I've had clients from Indian backgrounds whose families have said, if you get
Very
divorced,
firm.
like you're out
You're
of the
out of the
will.
family. Yeah.
And I've had, in the Orthodox Jewish religion, also very difficult to get a divorce, because you don't just need to divorce from the person, you need to divorce religiously from the temple, and that
Right.
that itself, instills a lot of shame. But I think in general, like, we're a more empowered society. Even, devout Catholics. Oh my God. In my
Right.
day, we just sucked it up and we stayed together. And it's like, well,
Right.
yeah, that's why we're in therapy now, grandma. Thanks. But
Right.
um, I really do think, like I said, it's a choice. Like, if you are empowered in your decision and you really see the benefit to your life improving after making this decision,
Right.
you can take what people say and you can let it affect you, or you could just take it as, it's really, people say these things out of fear, like they don't
I
want it to
agree.
happen to them. And
Right.
like when my mom would say things like, and this is a mom who saw me become estranged from her father. Like,
Hmm.
how are you going to let Bella's so small? How are you going to let her go to her dad's 50% of the time? She's still in diapers. And I was like, I could choose to let that make me feel terrible. But my
Right.
firm belief was like, core attachment is developed ages 0 to 5, and she's
Right.
2. And so
Right.
that time is critical. Even if
Yep.
it kills me to send her off in her little
Hmm.
diaper, it was more beneficial to her. So you got to let what
And
people say roll off of you.
I agree. And it was better for your mental well-being in the long run, which serves your daughter as
For
a
sure.
now you're serving your daughter as a much, much better parent. And I'm sure her dad is a much better parent as a result of all of this. So
I
there
see that
is,
100%.
right, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but we have to put in the work. We have to
You,
be aware. We have to do the right things for our children and also for ourselves. So that's where I think all that balance comes from is making sure the kids are okay and making sure we're okay.
yeah, and you really have to be okay first, honestly. It
Yes.
sounds so cliche, but like, you taking care of yourself first and understanding yourself emotionally, physically, knowing when you need a break, knowing when you need to call in a lifeline, knowing what your
Right.
triggers are going to be and how you're going
Mhm.
to react to them so that it doesn't spill out onto your children. That's all really important. I think I the best thing I did was get really clear on where I needed to spend my energy
Mhm.
and where I could save it. And that really helped improve things for me.
So let's talk about your community, your coaches, your
Yeah.
certifications. Can you share that all with us?
Yeah. So I think back when I started talking about divorce on Instagram, there wasn't a whole lot of,
Wait, and what made you do that, Michelle? What made you just get on Instagram and start talking about divorce?
oh, my divorce. And when I started writing about it, for
Okay.
all these different publications, that was like, I
Mhm.
would post, new article in Scary Mommy on life as a single parent. And so
Okay. I
it
love
kind
that.
of started this cycle. But it became very popular in the recent years to talk about divorce on social media. And some of what I see is such terrible misinformation. And basically now anybody who's gotten divorced is calling themselves a coach. And I get clients who say, well, such and such told me, and I'm like, oh my God, no, because people are only informing other people based on their own experiences. And that's the
Right.
worst thing you can do.
Right. Right. Thank you
That
for
is
pointing that
not
out.
that is not an unbiased lens, right? So
Mhm.
I created a divorce coaching certification. So my training, it's called the Moving On Method certification. It teaches coaches how to coach and also how to help clients focus on the best interests of the kids. So it's not just like, you're divorced, I'm going to give you a pep talk every day. It's like helping clients see through their own bullshit so that they
Mhm.
can help their kids. And that's one of the proudest things I've done. We've trained so many women. We've had sold out trainings every month since we started in late 2022.
Wow.
Um, I have my book, Mom's Moving On, which seems
Yes.
to, keep bringing people to the party here. That's really like a how-to step-by-step guide, like what to expect when you're expecting for a divorcing mom. And then
Right.
I do work individually with clients. I have a team of coaches that work individually with clients as well. I tend to do one-on-ones on a more limited basis just because I'm running so many things. We also have the podcast.
Right.
There's a lot. And And my workshops are actually what bring me the most joy. I host monthly workshops on a number of topics, and then they're all available for sale on my website. So
Mhm.
many different ways you can immerse yourself in learning and growing and preparing for the best possible scenario once you choose to divorce. It's just a matter of how you want to work with us.
I was going to ask you what brings you the most joy. How do you like to help women the most? And you answered that.
Yeah, I think when I run these like I love working one-on-one and helping people. And listen, I've had clients from like the top celebrities you could think of to the average mom like me,
Mhm.
and they each individually bring me such fulfillment. But when I run the groups, the beauty is women meeting each other and
Right.
connecting. And like
Yes.
one of the first groups I ran in like
Support.
2019, they still have a group chat ongoing. They take yearly trips together. Like that support
Mhm.
is invaluable.
It is.
And I love seeing that happen.
Yeah, because the hardest thing about divorce is feeling alone and
Oh
feeling
yeah.
alienated,
Mhm.
and that, you don't have any support. Nobody
Mhm.
understands what you're doing. And as I mentioned before, nobody's inviting you to parties anymore, and you're just alone and,
Mhm.
you know, might be second guessing, did I make the right decision? But in your gut, because that's what
Mhm.
you follow, is your gut instinct to say, no, this is what's best for me, therefore it's going to be better for my children. And that's what
Mhm.
I kept saying to myself. And I hear that from a lot of women. And there still is that, oh, when you meet people, oh, she's single, or oh, she's divorced. And I heard you talking about this on your podcast recently, that the man is considered, as he gets older, an eligible bachelor. But the woman, if she's single, is like a spinster, right? She's
Yes.
considered a spinster at 50, and
Mhm.
now we've got all these women over 60 who are divorced, or they're, a lot of divorced women looking for somebody. And, but they're considered like, just go and hang out with your grandchildren. Don't
Right.
you shouldn't be out there dating.
Right. No, I've seen some beautiful love stories and not just clients, but people in my community, my mom's friends. I mean, my mom is remarried. Her this is a fun little segue, but her divorce attorney when my parents separated became her husband. They fell in love and
No.
very Sex in the City, like very Charlotte and Harry.
I love
Um
that.
And unfortunately, he died tragically when I was in my early 20s. And she was in her late 40s, like such a babe, beautiful. She was an eligible bachelorette and she ended up remarrying. And, it's like this beautiful love story. Like they're in their 60s and early 70s and they're just like enamored. And so,
Love
they're
that.
really, I don't, I mean, they call it gray divorce, but like it really is a beautiful opportunity at any age to find what really fulfills you.
Being 63, I know a lot of women who are in very unloving, unfulfilling relationships, and they feel just stuck. Their kids know they're stuck. They
Mhm.
know that mom and dad aren't happy. But
Mhm.
in so many cases, I think with my generation, that women just stay because financially they don't see a way out. And I
Jody,
really,
I do you know how many women, married women, very wealthy, very whatever, who have said to me, "You're so lucky."
mm,
And they know their husbands are cheating. They know they're
mm,
unhappy. They know there's financial stuff going on, but this fear of the unknown keeps them where
right.
they are. And they say to me, "You're so lucky." I'm like, "Lucky? Do you know what I had to go through to get here?" But I get it.
Right,
I
right.
I get it. I do really feel like fortune favors the bold, and divorce is a
Mhm.
very bold step.
It is a bold step. I'm so glad you said that. And women should feel empowered and not ashamed of doing it, and doing it right. And when I say right, everybody, and you've explained that really well, there is really no right way. There's the right way for you and for your
Mhm.
children and with your ex-spouse. So if you had to leave everybody with your core message, what you wish for the future, what would it be?
I wish more people would recognize that every opportunity with our children is a chance to fill their cup or empty it. And our children in our care, they're only children for such a short period of time. And we have no business draining their cups. We should be the
Mm.
ones they run to for a full cup. And every time you make them feel badly about their relationship with their other parent, or you talk badly about the other parent, you're dipping into their cup, and that's not fair to them.
That's a beautiful message. And
Thanks.
what does it mean for you to be fearlessly authentic?
So funny. I was just talking to my therapist about this morning. It's making decisions and understanding, I think, having intention behind your actions and knowing why it is that you're making the choices you make. Did you make that choice to buy that bag because you really love it, or because everyone else is carrying it, right? Like, be what feels good to you and own it. And that's authenticity.
Thank you for that. How can our listeners reach you?
I'm on Instagram at the Michelle Dempsey. My website is michelledempsey.com. The podcast is Moms Moving On. The book is Moms Moving On, sold everywhere. And all my programs, courses, if you want to become a trained divorce coach, all of that's on my website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing all your knowledge, and hopefully helping the women listening that if they're thinking about divorce, they can reach out to you and you can help guide them, educate them,
Thank you.
empower them. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And for everyone listening today, thank you so much for tuning in. And until I see you next time, go be fearlessly authentic. Bye-bye, everyone.